Good morning. Good morning and welcome to Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist in-person and online worship. Whether today is your first time here or you've been coming for years, we're glad you are here. My name is Bill Burge, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm serving as this morning's worship associate. We are a growing community that transforms lives through the power of love. Our mission calls for us to celebrate diversity, to encourage spiritual growth, and to promote social responsibility while we care for the earth. Welcome to those at home who are joining us on Zoom today. Anyone attending for the first time, please go to our website and fill out the welcome card so we can stay in contact. Just a few announcements. Artisan Fair, it's time to organize. Please see the sign-up poster in lobby during coffee hour for the Artisan Fair. Terry Grover and Celeste Stickney are doing that. And also the organizers of the September 29th Land Walk event are in the process of collecting your thoughts and ideas for the first station of the Earth on the A2U2 property for respite and reflection. If you have input or ideas to share, please stop by the boardroom between 11:15 and 11:45. So 11:15 and 11:45. Patricia Ellen, one of the leaders of this project, will be ready to hear your ideas. Now, we invite you to take this opportunity to silence your cell phones so that we can all be fully present. After the service, please grab a cup of coffee or tea and stay for conversation, or head down to the end of the hall to join the brown bag lunch. Those on Zoom can stay on and connect with one another. Let us center our hearts and minds with the ringing of the chimes.
Good morning, church. It's good to see each of you this morning, those I have met before and those I have not. My name is Reverend Tara. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the minister here at Allen Ave, UU Church, A2U2 for short. I know that many of our beloveds are traveling this long weekend, but I am glad you are here. There is no separate RE program today, so children and youth will stay here in the sanctuary where they are invited to be their full selves, whatever noises or movement that may look and sound like. There are materials to engage with at the front of the sanctuary. And nursery care is available if you'd prefer to use that. You can see an usher at the back of the sanctuary. This morning we gather as the high holy days have ended and Indigenous Peoples' Day will soon begin. Both holidays call us to reflect on the role of truth-telling in our lives and on the role of atonement in our own lives too. And so we ask each other and ourselves, how do the stories we've constructed about who we are impact our ability to engage in processes of repentance and repair? What would it look like to start telling the truth collectively as a people and as a nation? What is our role as Unitarian Universalists in helping make it so? We gather this morning, as always, with more questions than answers. But by grace, we are in good company. So friends, come into this space, this community of learning, growing, imperfect, beloved souls, where we journey together as one people, as one community. Come and be welcome. You are joyfully called to worship.
As we light our sanctuary chalice this morning, those joining us on Zoom are invited to light a chalice or candle near you to connect us more deeply with one another. Of course, truth is hard. It is a rock, yet I do not think it will fall upon me and crush me. I do not think they can hammer it to bits and stone me. Help me place the rock in the strong current of these rushing waters. I must climb upon it. I must know how truth feels. When I plunge naked into the bright depths of these waters, I must know how truth feels. When I am swept by the cold fury of these waters, I must know with my whole being how truth feels. I shall remember how truth feels. We light our chalice this morning in the spirit of truth.
And we light a second candle this morning, a candle of community. Whether reckoning with our history of U.S. Indian boarding schools, witnessing the violence in the Middle East, or learning of the humanitarian crisis in the Sudan, we remember that we are all connected, that a broken heart is an open heart, and that liberation for some of us is not liberation. Will you take a breath with me? Our opening hymn this morning in your gray hymnal is 119. It'll also be up on the screen. Once to every soul and nation. Emily is with us today. Dale is off this morning, so this is very exciting. Emily will play it through once, and then you are invited to rise in body or in spirit as we sing together. Who can tell me what religious holiday ended last night? Yom Kippur. The Jewish high holy days or days of awe begin with Rosh Hashanah and end with Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Through fasting, worship, and prayer, Jews confess the harm they have caused the past year and make amends, returning to right relationship with God, with each other, with their deepest selves, and setting intentions for the year to come. Bill has offered to share the practice of blowing the shofar with us today. Time to turn down your hearing aids. In particular, sharing the sound that signifies the end of Yom Kippur. Bill converted to Judaism in 2006 and was a member at Temple Beth El before his spiritual journey led him to us. He'll explain a little bit about what the shofar is and has offered also to share some other shofar blasts with us outside after worship, if it's not raining, for those who would like to hear them.
The blast I'll be blowing is called Tekiah Gedolah. It's described as a long blast, or as long a blast as possible with one breath, and it's always increasing in volume. If you plug your ears to protect your hearing, I'll consider it a compliment. But first, a story about how the shofar saved the firstborn. Abraham lived in a time of crazy beliefs. Crazy beliefs are still around, like the value of war. Maybe you can think of some others. Anyway, during Abraham's time, everyone believed that you had to sacrifice your firstborn. So Abraham went to go do this. Was walking up the mountain with his firstborn, taking rope and fire things and things to start the fire, and also a knife. He got up there, and as you can imagine, he was pretty upset, and I was wondering, do I really have to do this? Is this really what's being called on me? Does the universe want me to do this? And he noticed his emotions and how he felt at the time, and he stayed in the moment. And at that moment, he noticed a ram whose horn had been caught in vines. And so he instinctively just went to save the ram. And the ram was wild, so it freaked out when it saw Abraham coming at him with a knife and broke off its horn. In fact, I have one that looks like it right here. And took off running. And so Abraham, instead of doing what he was planning on doing, just backed away and blew the horn. It was attached kind of like this, or something like that. And so the tip is broken off as well, and that's why I allowed him to blow it. Anyway, here we go. Thanks.
Stay tuned for what happens next. Thank you, Bill. Every one of us has caused harm, has been harmed, and has a relationship with telling and unearthing the truth. We carry stories both inherited and constructed, for our lives are, and this world is, complicated. Would you join me in the spirit of prayer? Spirit of life, God of many names, source of hope. We come together at the end of another week, some worn down by struggles of health, of home, of work. May we be a community that makes space for the sharing of joys and sorrows, angers and hopes, struggles, with grace and forbearance. In our nation's life, we pause this holiday weekend to remember the Native American lives lost from the European colonization on what is now our soil. Teach us, Holy One, to remember our history. Though we cannot make amends for what has come before, may we learn from those ways never to repeat them in our lives today. May we develop new ways of relating to neighbor and stranger without violence or coercion, deceit, or greed. Mother of grace, help us to find a sense of humility where we have privilege and strength where we face oppression. In our struggles, may we learn compassion, and in our prayer, in our power, may we learn temperance. As a community of faith, may we be a safe harbor in a world that is often harsh toward difference. Challenge us to use our presence as a healing force for justice and equity. Knowing that although we have come far in the civil rights struggles of our times, there are many people still left behind. And the work of building the beloved community is just as pressing as ever before. May we take up this work. Amen.
Now is when we engage in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts support our ministry and our work in the broader community. Each week, 1/3 of our plate is given to a local nonprofit organization who's also working to advance our shared values. This month's Share the Plate recipient is Musan, the Maine Unitarian Universalist State Advocacy Network, which is a statewide advocacy and public policy network anchored in UU faith. Everyone can donate now in person or through our website's donate button. Members can also donate through the Share the Plate option on Breeze. If you are visiting for the first time this morning, please know that your presence is gift enough. At this time, our offering will be collected and gratefully received.
A reading by the poet David White. Haunted is a word that denotes an unresolved parallel, a presence that is not quite a presence, a visitation by the as yet unspeakable. It is also emblematic of the longing for incarnation, of not finding a home in this world or in the next, someone or something that walks the halls of our house or our mind, looking for what will help to lay its own self to rest. What haunts us is something that seeks its own disappearance. If we feel continually haunted over time, we begin to become ghost-like ourselves and roam with intent whilst not quite knowing the object of our intention. Looking in the mirror, our face begins to look like our not quite incarnated life. We walk not exactly existing in the world we visit. Like the spirits and half-beings we imitate at Halloween, we roam the streets as if looking for an abode on this earth. We are unable to locate it, demanding tribute from those who dwell within. We cease to be haunted when we cease to be afraid of making what has been untouchable real, especially our understandings of the past, and especially those we wronged, those we were wronged by, or those we did not help. We become real by forgiving ourselves, and we forgive ourselves by changing the foundational pattern, and especially by changing our present behavior to those we have hurt. A fear of ghosts or a fear of our own haunted mind is the measure of our absence in this world. We cease to be afraid when we give away what was never ours in the first place and begin to be present to our own lives just as we find them, even in facing what we have banished from our thoughts and made homeless, even when we do not know the way forward ourselves, when we make a friend of what we previously could not face. What once haunted us now becomes an invisible parallel ally, a beckoning hand to our future. We banish the misaligned when we align with what we are called to. We become visible and real when we give our gift and stop waiting for the gift to be given to us. We wake into our lives again as if for the first time, laying to rest what previously had no home through beginning to speak, beginning to make real, and beginning to live those elements constellating inside us that long to move from the invisible to the visible. Therein ends our reading. Let's sing. Number 83 in your gray hymnal or up on the screen, Winds Be Still. Emily will play it through once and then we'll rise and sing together.
The parable of the foolish builders. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain came, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundations on rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash.
There. That was the sermon. America is a house built on sand. And I'm not talking about hurricanes. America is a house built on sand. A nation built on myths, on stories that, as author Richard Hughes explains, whether true or false, help us discern the meaning and purpose of our lives, and for that reason, speak truth to those who embrace them. He highlights 5 myths that have shaped the formation of this country. The myth of a chosen nation. The notion that God Almighty chose the United States for a special mission in the world. The myth of nature's nation. The conviction that American ideals and institutions are rooted in the natural order, in God's intentions first revealed at the dawn of civilization. The myth of the millennial nation. The notion that the United States, building on that natural order, will usher in a final golden age for all of humankind. 4, the myth of a Christian nation. The claim that America is a Christian nation, consistently guided by Christian values. And 5, the myth of an innocent nation. The conviction that while other nations may have blood on their hands, the nobility of the American cause always redeems the nation and renders it innocent. And the fundamental primal myth, white supremacy, is protected and hidden from our awareness by those other 5. Michelle Alexander, author of The New Jim Crow, names that, contrary to what many people would have us believe, what our nation is experiencing is not an aberration. The politics of Trumpism and fake news are not new. They are as old as the nation itself. The thing about founding myths, primal myths, is that they become part of the DNA of a people, of an institution, of a nation itself. These founding myths were fueled by the doctrine of discovery and themselves fueled the doctrine of manifest destiny, the vision of America as a new promised land, the new Jerusalem, resulting in the genocide of the indigenous peoples and the mass enslavement of Black and brown people. And they continue, these founding myths, to divide us, guiding us to our current predicament. Think of how many years we misremembered the events of 1492 and spent tomorrow's holiday teaching our children a lie. In the words of Adam Russell Taylor in A More Perfect Nation, America's memory is haunted. He writes, "Our national stories, our stories of us, convey what we value, what has shaped us, and where we have been. While telling the whole story about our history can be uncomfortable and painful, it is necessary and ultimately redemptive, a prerequisite to constructing a more hopeful and unifying shared story that plants and waters the seeds of the beloved community. Neither a house built on sand nor a nation built on deadly myths will weather the tests of time. We know that. My colleague, Rabbi Jared Sachs, who serves Congregation Bet Ham in South Portland, shared his Rosh Hashanah sermon with our clergy group this week. He reflected on Israel and the master story, as he called it, or myth that Israel is built on. He named it as Zionism. In the same way, I have been thinking about the United States and our master story, our founding myth, white supremacy. He shares in his sermon a passage written by Rabbi B'nai Lepay about how eventually every master story, every myth, crashes as we and the world change. How every house built on sand will fall. The rabbi writes, there are only three possible responses to a crash. Option one, which is denying that a crash has occurred and reverting to your master story and hanging on for dear life. And people tend to build walls around that old master story to make sure that nothing interferes with it or threatens it again. Option two would be accepting that your master story has crashed, completely rejecting it, and jumping off into a completely new story. Option three is to accept that the story has crashed, but instead of abandoning the story, you stay in it, reinterpreting it through the lens of the crash and building a new story from the amalgamation of the original story, the crash material, and the reinterpretation. Until we can accept that a crash has occurred and stop hanging on for dear life, telling the full story as best we can, we'll be rebuilding and remodeling and adding additions to a house built on sand. We will remain a people haunted. I know that right now, for many of us, telling the truth and naming the ways in which the story has crashed feels like screaming into the void. Much of our country is not interested in truth, invested instead in a post-truth politics. The lie that the 2020 election was stolen is its own master story, its own grounding myth, its own house built on sand. We see every day the ways in which lies beget more lies, in which truth-telling becomes impossible, because once you begin to tell the truth, once you begin to pull on that thread, everything unravels. There is no tugging without unraveling the whole. Adam Russell Taylor writes wisely that truth-telling is good for the soul, but it often comes with a price tag on our reputation. Because often the truth isn't particularly nice to hear. It requires owning harm. It requires, at the very least, owning complacency, being wrong. And it requires repair. All of this is work. It requires work. And I am unsure as any of us, about how to help those completely uninterested in being in reality and looking at facts and naming our founding myths as such. I am unsure about how to help them enter this work. It is the burning question of this political moment, and I do not have an answer. What I do know, I know some things. What I do know is that our history and our shared life today is full of horror, of exclusion, of violence, and that there are glimmers of radical welcome, of equity, and of beauty. This push and pull, in Russell Taylor's words, continues to tug at the very meaning of who America has been and who it will be. What I do know is that my Unitarian Universalist faith is wide, broad, deep enough to hold the complexity of the truth and to hold me up in all that truth requires of me. What I do know is that my faith, our faith, has a clear message to guide us through these times. Core to our Unitarian Universalist tradition is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and a commitment to repair harm and damaged relationships. With justice as one of our core 6 values, we are tasked to embody diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive, and to covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. And the value of our tradition that speaks most deeply to my heart and that is at the core of my ministry is that of transformation. Unitarian Universalists are called to adapt to the changing world and covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. The dean of my seminary, Sarah Drummond, offered on her blog last month, after noticing recently the, in her words, growing frequency with which leaders name terrible things out loud, end quote. I'm one of these leaders. She offered what she calls a contrition curriculum. Contrition referring to contrite, the feeling of or expressing guilt or remorse. Critical for those engaging with institutions who have histories that include terrible things, which is all of us. Yeah. First, she says, name the myth, the harm, out loud. Then figure out how our institution, our community, is continuing to cause harm in a way that the myth, the original story, normalized. Then clean the wound. Tell the truth. Correct past lies in the stories we're telling ourselves, each other, and the world. Next, learn as much as we can, for light, she writes, functions as an antiseptic. And finally, take action to make things right, even if that looks like simply identifying next steps within our reach. And all of this truth-telling, this reinterpreting and restorying, all of this pouring of a new foundation can and absolutely must be done from a place of love. For we too will get a lot wrong and need our attempts at truth unwound and rewoven. I hope that my generation's children will be just as critical of our teaching of history as I am of my teachers, because it means we are still transforming, changing, and learning, neither complete nor perfect. And I'm not ready to abandon an American story. I hope you're not either. With the amalgamation of the original, the crash material, and there's a lot of that, and the reinterpretation through honest truth-telling, who knows what we could end up with? If it's anything like the country I know, it will be impossibly heartbreaking, deeply complicated, yet still full of possibility, even now. And perhaps one day we will be like the wise builder in the parable. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on rock. May it be so, because we make it so. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 34 in your gray hymnal and up on the screen, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. After Emily plays it through once, let us rise and join in song. Thank you so much. In the words of our reading, we cease to be afraid when we give away what was never ours in the first place and begin to be present in our own lives just as we find them, even in facing what we have banished from our thoughts, even when we do not know the way forward ourselves. When we make a friend of what we previously could not face, what once haunted us becomes an invisible parallel ally, a beckoning hand to our future. Our worship has ended, and our service begins. Speak the truth and go in love.
Okay.